I want you to build a practice that is going to support you in the long haul. So that is going to take a little bit of time. When you are starting with a low budget, $1,000 in this case, you cannot just quit your job and hope for the best, right? You are not going to have a lot of wiggle room here. You didn't start your practice to barely hang on. I'll guess you started it for freedom, impact, and profit. This is Therapy for Your Money. I'm your host, Julie Harris. I'm an accountant, author of Profit First for Therapists, and CEO of Green Oak Accounting. Over the years, my team and I have partnered with hundreds of private practice owners, whether they're just getting started, scaling into thriving groups, or even preparing to sell. We've seen it all, and we know exactly what makes a practice tick financially. On Therapy for Your Money, I'll help you build a business that truly works for you. You'll get quick, actionable tips and episodes so that you can grow a profitable practice, increase your financial confidence, and pay yourself unapologetically, because your work is way too important for you to burn out or go broke doing it. Love the podcast? Make sure to follow and give us a 5-star review. Here is Therapy for Your Money. Hello and welcome to Therapy for Your Money. This is a series that I have had on my podcast to-do list for a long time. I have had this as an idea for a while, and I'm excited to finally get it over to you today. So this is the first episode of a series of 3 where I'm going to tell you how I would start a private practice today on $1,000, on $3,000, and on $5,000. So what would I do? What are the steps that I would take? What are the things that I would spend money on? And what are the things that I would not spend money on based on each budget? So I'm talking here about starting a solo private practice, right? Where it's just you as the owner, doing business. It is not a group practice where you're opening multiple locations at a time, right? That is not what I'm talking about with this kind of budget. But if I was trying to start a practice, which is a small business, on those dollar amounts, I've seen at this point under the hood of thousands of practices. I want to tell you exactly what I would do, where I would start, what are the building blocks, and how I would build as the budget goes up. So when you are starting a small business, and a private practice is a small business, you have kind of 2 main things that you can invest, right? One is money. That's usually cash that is either your personal reserves, right? What you can save above and beyond your living expenses. So, or a loan. So you might be using a credit card, might be taking out a small loan to start the business, but you usually need cash. So you need some money to start a business, certainly. And then, so that is one of the things that you have to invest. And the other one is time and energy, right? I'm putting those 2 together, but the sweat equity, the DIYing. So sometimes you're going to be able to spend some money in order to save some time or just spend less energy on a specific task. And other times you're just not going to have that kind of money. And so you're going to just spend a lot of time doing something instead of paying someone else to do it. That's just how it's going to be. And for each episode, I'm going to have a list of resources that I would recommend. You definitely don't have to use those resources, but just if you are looking for some of the different vendors that I talk about, definitely check them out because I want to make it as easy as possible for you to do the same thing. So I hope you will follow along for all 3 episodes. I hope you will share it with one of maybe your business besties or someone you work with who's been thinking about starting their own practice, and that you will follow along together. So on that note, let's get started. $1,000. That's not a whole lot of cash when it comes to starting a business. It is not a lot of money. So I'm a big fan of you starting a business in a very intentional way. That means knowing in advance how much you're going to spend and putting that money aside so that you can track it really carefully, right? I want you to be able to know of that money, how much has already been spent. So that is, it's just a way to keep yourself accountable as you are going down the path to business ownership. So my goal for any practice owner is always that you will build a practice that is financially sustainable, right? That can pay its bills, right? That makes more money than it spends. I want you to build a practice that is going to support you in the long haul. So that is going to take a little bit of time. When you are starting with a low budget, $1,000 in this case, you cannot just quit your job and hope for the best, right? You are not going to have a lot of wiggle room here. And so there's a really good chance that by spending only $1,000, like you are not going to make a whole lot of money right at the beginning. So I do think it's helpful if you are able to, if you can ethically do that based on your contract, to start building a practice while you are still employed or have income flowing. So if you are ethically not able to do that, maybe that means that you are leaving a position and then taking a different kind of job while you are building your practice so that you can have revenue coming into the business immediately, right? Or into your life. Or maybe that you are relying on a spouse to support your life, but the lower the budget, the more I want you to give yourself a nice long runway because it's going to take time. I cannot say that enough. It will take you time to get this off the ground. I also want to make sure that you are not funneling clients like who are reaching out to you at maybe a group practice where you are working and just funneling them over to your new private practice. Like that is unethical. I do not think you should be doing that. And so I want you to have kind of that clear boundary. But if you are working, for example, at an agency, at a hospital center, and you are able to start your private practice on the side, you can then do that with a pretty low budget because you are kind of moving both at the same time, right? You have that stability of your job while you are building this new practice. You don't have to go quickly because you have time on your side. Let's talk legal and financial first. My general recommendation is if you are in a state where you can operate as an LLC or a PLLC, that's a professional LLC, I would recommend going that route from the very, very beginning. Depending on the state that you are in, that is typically going to cost you somewhere between $50 to $200, but you can usually do that directly on the Secretary of State website. You don't need to use a third party service. You can do it directly. Just open up that LLC, that's a limited liability company, or the PLLC, and then you have that. That is the first step. So you've already spent, let's say, $100. Then I would go to the IRS website and I would get an EIN. That's an employer identification number. That is free. It costs you $0. So I would get that. But you need to have that legal entity first before you can get the free EIN, right? So that's why I'm going in that order. Then once you have those two things, I would get a business bank account. That is typically also not going to cost you anything, but you need the first two documents in order to get your business bank account. So again, I'm going in that order. So far you've spent only $100, but by having that separate entity and a separate business bank account, you are keeping your finances clean. You are keeping kind of church and state completely separate, right? So you can now take that personal investment, that $1,000 that you were contributing to the business, that's not income to the business, but you can put that in the business bank account. This is the money that you now have to spend for the business. So we're now down to $900 or so. Next, I would probably go with a website. So I didn't talk about, in order to get a website, you're going to have a business name. And honestly, in order to get your business registration, right, your LLC, you will need a business name. This is personally an area that I think people spend way too much time on this, overanalyze it, and spend like weeks crowdsourcing. What do you think of this name? What do you think of that name? My true answer, and I've been a business owner for 10 years now. It does. No one cares about your business name other than you. No one. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The colors that you pick do not matter for your logo. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. So just pick something and move on. You can always change it later if you decide it's not the right name. So pick something and move on. There's a million decisions that you need to make in the process of opening your business. This is not one to spend a whole lot of time with. Come up with a couple of names, take a couple of days to think about it, make a decision, move on. If you need to, you can change it later. So then I would go to a website. You're going to find a domain on Squarespace. You can buy domain previously. Google Domains is where I bought domains. Now Squarespace is the spot. So I would probably buy a domain there. I think it's like $12 or $14. So you still have plenty of money left. And then I would probably look for a website template. on a service like Squarespace or Wix. Now, I know WordPress is really popular, but WordPress is just a little harder to use, in my opinion. It's harder to build. And so I'm thinking at this point, based on this $1,000 budget, that you're DIYing your website. Like, what is it going to look like? I'm personally not, I'm not good at graphic design. I'm really bad at it, actually. But I think there's something to be said for DIYing the first version of your website. When your budget is limited, you can get kind of your minimum viable product off the ground, your minimum viable website, and you can build it again later. So I would just get something really, really simple up and running, a template that you use from a website like Wix, Squarespace, and you customize it, well, you mostly just use the template, right? And you might plan to redo it in 6 to 12 months and actually spend some money then and have a professional do it. But there's something to be said for like just getting it off the ground. And so that's where I would go. Get a website up and running, simple and professional. That is all you need. Then I would go to profile, like profile websites. So that might be a professional, like if someone is looking for someone of your profession. We have a lot of listeners who are mental health, physical therapy, speech therapy, right? So wherever people are looking for a physical therapist or a mental health therapist, like I would go there. I would pay the $30 to $50 for the listing. And then I would use ChatGPT to write your profile, right? You don't want to put any kind of PHI in ChatGPT ever, ever. But when you're writing your profile, right, have a conversation with ChatGPT. Like, who is your ideal client? What type of work lights you up? What type of work that do you want to do? And have ChatGPT write you a really great listing profile. So that part is going to be free. The profile is going to be, 30, 50 bucks. But that is a great way to start marketing. So now you have a website, you have a profile, people are able to start finding you. And even if you're not quite open for business just yet, I would still put those things up. Even if you're not really ready to see your first client, I would not wait because it's going to take a while for people to actually start finding you. I know a lot of people who just are worried of, oh, let me wait until the day that I'm ready to start seeing clients to put the website up. No, put it up as fast as you can so that the algorithm, right, whatever that is, like Google and all the search engines can start finding your website and start crawling it. So if you have a little bit of time, great. Next up, I would get an email. I love G Suite, which is Google. You can also use Microsoft. That's usually going to run you about $15 a month. You can get a Google Workspace with your domain, right? You already bought a domain. You can get a Google Workspace. You might also be able to buy your domain directly from Google and just get your, Julie at mypracticename.com, right? Something like that. So definitely get that. And one of the reasons I like Google is because they make it really easy for you to get a BAA, a business associate agreement. You definitely want that. You want to have the HIPAA compliant version of Google. And so you can get all those things up and running and it's not very much money. So if you are getting this ready a couple months before you start your practice officially, before you're ready to see clients, it's going to run you, $50, $100, depending on how many months that is. But you can start communicating with people in a really professional way. So you can start networking. You can print business cards if you're planning on going to networking meetings, right? You can start using that email and your website in a really professional way. So speaking of business cards, that would probably be my next stop. I would go to Vistaprint or some other kind of inexpensive printer and just get 100, 200 business cards. You don't need 1,000, right? It's not a big deal because you're probably going to make some changes to the way you present your practice at some point in the near future. So get 100 or so. Maybe you have paid money for a logo at this point, maybe not. A logo just the logo alone, if you could easily spend $1,000 on it, there's a lot of less expensive ways to get one. But I just don't think this is your final logo. You might be going on Fiverr or Upwork and getting something that you're then going to use on your website, maybe on your business card. But this is not a time where I think you need to spend a ton of money on that. So if you have a friend who's, visually inclined, you might ask them for some help. You might ask ChatGPT for some help, but this is not going to be the final version that you are still going to have in 5 to 10 years. So just pick something and move on. And really, in this phase, I really don't want you to get stuck on colors or logos. Like my goal is to get you to a place where you can start generating revenue in the practice. And so these are all the tools that you need to do that. Next up, I also think I'm going to little plug here for one of our offerings at Green Oak Accounting. We have a wonderful practice startup course. It is $59, and I definitely would recommend taking that when you are just in that beginning place. You really cannot afford a lot of things in this $1,000 budget. And so I would start there. For 59 bucks, you're going to get a whole lot of information on what you need to do and how to stay compliant, how you're tracking your income, what you can deduct and what you cannot deduct. And I think that is going to be a really great way to just get the education you need so that you know what is going on. You're going to understand like how the cash works in your practice. And I think that's a great place to be. That way you don't have to pay to work with an accountant or get a bookkeeper in this phase, right? You're just going to do all of it on your own. That's completely okay. Next up, let's talk payment, insurance, credentialing, how money is going to come into the practice. If you plan to take insurance, I want you to start the credentialing process as early as possible. Minimum 90 days before you plan to take your first client. Sometimes it's going to take longer. And so credentialing delays are normal. Do plan accordingly. You can DIY credentialing. You may need to. If you're going to go that route, there are multiple Facebook groups around credentialing where you might be able to find some free resources. You can watch some YouTube videos. Um, this is an area where you may actually want to spend some money to make sure that you are getting it done right. A lot of the firms who do credentialing will do it for a few $100s. So this might be one of the more expensive items that you do, but you may spend $250 to $300 to get credentialed. That might be worth it for you, right? If you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. If you are DIYing that, I would definitely get some resources, some free resources before you go into it so that you can do it correctly. You could also, separately from that, if you're going to take insurance, I would really recommend a course like the Be Your Own Biller course. I think that's actually a membership now, but so that you can understand claims, reimbursements, paperwork, how all of it works. Even if you want to eventually have a biller, I would want you to understand how that all works so that you can oversee what your biller is actually doing. Okay. And then also, kind of in this vein, you want to start thinking about how you are going to take payment. So even if you are not taking insurance, how are you going to take payment? That is usually going to be something that is related to your electronic health records, your electronic medical records, right? Your EHR or your EMR. So that is a pretty big decision, which one you are going to pick. There's a lot of great options out there, but I do recommend that whichever EMR or EHR you pick, that is the tool that you use. You're going to use it for everything that you can. So that's going to be scheduling, billing, notes, everything. What I don't want you to do is pick an EMR and then say, well, actually I can pay like 0.5% less in credit card fees if I use this completely separate outside billing system or credit card processing system. That theoretically sounds like a great idea, but in practice, you're going to spend so much time reconciling the payments that it is not worth it. I really, really highly recommend that for simplicity's sake and for the sake of knowing what your actual accounts receivable is, that you use the payment processor directly integrated in your EMR. That is going to save you a whole lot of time. Let's recap so far. You have a website, you're on some directory listings. There's probably a lot of free ones out there too, so get on as many as you can. You have business cards, you're able to start networking, you can take payments, right? Like we've got a lot of things figured out at this point, and we have not even spent the whole $1,000. So I think you're in a really great place. If you plan to have a physical location, now that's probably going to be the last kind of big item that you are going to spend money on. If you are starting a telehealth practice, or maybe you are going to clients' homes, your patients' homes, then you're not going to have to spend money on space. But if you have a telehealth practice, you can then use Google Meet as your way to meet virtually because you already have that BAA in place. Or your EHR EMR might have an option that's integrated that is also available, but you usually don't need to spend extra money on a telehealth platform. However, if you are wanting to be in person and have an office or just be away from your home, this is where you have to be really frugal with this $1,000 budget. You don't have a whole lot of money to spend. You really, really don't. So your only option typically is going to be to sublet one single office from an existing practice, from a co-working space, right, where you can have a door that locks and that is confidential. Like those are going to be your options, and that's going to be where you spend the remaining money that you have available, if you have any money available. This decision is probably going to wait until a little bit closer to you being open to serving clients, just because you don't want to hold that rent for multiple months, right? But you've seen there's so many things that you can get ready beforehand while you are setting up the practice so that you're just ready to go, right? You're not figuring that out and seeing clients. You've got a lot of things figured out ahead of time. And that's why we've spent a lot of sweat equity and time working on these items so that you don't have to spend a lot of money there. A couple of other items that I would highly recommend in this phase. Let's say you're taking 90 days to get your practice set up. I would consider consuming as many podcasts, blog posts, webinars as you possibly can to learn the ropes. Learn what are the concerns that practice owners have right now? What are they working on? What are some of the challenges that they have? And so I would listen to a lot of different podcast episodes. I personally love to listen when I'm in the car or when I'm walking. I usually have like a little earbud in and I'm listening to something. I just find that super educational. So you would want to do that and consume as much as you can, just because you don't have the money in this budget for coaching. So you want to be able to find a lot of that information on your own. And a lot of the great coaches out there have a podcast. So there's some level of free information that they have. And then later on, when there's revenue coming into the practice, you can decide to do coaching with them. But you can start with the podcast. You also may want to consider a membership group. There's a lot of different options out there. Some are low cost, some are kind of medium cost, but you can typically be part of a membership group that has like a private Facebook group or some forums that you can ask questions in for, under $100 a month. So that can be a great place to get a lot of information in a pretty affordable way. Again, less expensive than coaching. And I do encourage you to spend some time networking, building referral partnerships. Just start that relationship building way before you think you need to, because it just takes time, right? If you were focusing on genuine connections, it's going to take time to build those relationships. And so I want you to give it a little more time than you think it's going to take. Let's do a full budget recap, and I'm going to throw in a couple of additional things that I forgot to mention. So we have our LLC or our PLLC, that's the legal entity that's going to run you 50 to $100. We have your domain name, that's about $15 per year. So not every month, just per year. We have your Google Workspace, that's going to be about $15 per month. Then we have your EMR or your EHR. That's going to vary pretty wildly. That's usually going to be somewhere in the $50 to $100 per month, right? So that's a more pricey one. You may want to do a lot of research, get that towards the time that you're ready to open things up, but like at least a month ahead. Your listing or directory websites, about $50 a month, more if you are going to be on more multiple listing websites. Then we have your website. If you are going with a Wix, that package is typically going to be about $30 per month. You're going to get access to their templates that way. An item that I did not mention, but I think is worth mentioning here, Private Practice Startup has a paperwork package that's, I believe, $299. Of course, prices may change because they're not my products, but you may want to check that out as far as your startup paperwork. Your EHR EMR sometimes has paperwork as well, but if that's not enough, or if they don't have that, this is an option available for you. Then you have the Practice Startup course. That's a course that my team at Green Oak offers for $59. You may or may not be paying for credentialing. That's about $250 to $300. Another course that I think is worth its weight in gold is the Intake Accelerator by Productive Practice. This is a $27 course, so very affordable, that is going to teach you, like, what do you need to know about intake? What are the technology tools that you need? What are some of the scripts that you should be using in order to convert potential clients into clients? So that's another thing to check out. I'm going to have the link in the show notes as well. One other item that you need to be aware of is malpractice or liability insurance. As a business owner, you definitely need to have that in your business owner toolkit. So do check out options. And I generally recommend, when you're starting on a limited budget, just go for the monthly pay option. Going to cost you a little bit more in the end, right? There typically is a discount for paying in full upfront, but it's going to use up so much of your budget that I just don't think it's worth it at this point. Use the cash flow to just pay the monthly premium, so that you can keep as much as your money as you can for right now. But you definitely need liability insurance and malpractice insurance when you are starting a practice. I want to put in here the Be Your Own Biller course. That's a membership of $45 per month. Then if you needed to, you could also get a Google Voice phone number. I haven't mentioned that before, but any of the Google paid plan can be HIPAA compliant, right? So you should not be getting a free Gmail for your business. That's not going to be HIPAA compliant. But if you have a paid Google Workspace and then a paid Google Voice, you're good to go. That's about $10 per month. And then maybe or maybe not, you are leasing some space or subleasing space from someone else. So that's kind of what your expenses might look like. You might need to carry some of these expenses for 2 or 3 months while you're getting things set up. Some of them will be a little bit of a shorter amount of time, but you want to make sure that you're able to carry those expenses without client income coming into the practice, because there is no income at this point. You're just getting everything ready. A couple of items that I would not spend money on right now. Stop. Do not. I would not be buying a new computer. Use whatever crappy computer you already have. It doesn't matter. Like, this is not the time to go spending money on a fancy computer on day one. You can upgrade later, right? I want you to, when you're starting on such a tight budget, we're talking $1,000 here. That is not that much money. What can we do now? What is the minimum viable product we can set up now and then upgrade later? That's how I want you to be thinking. If I was starting with $1,000, I probably would not be spending money on office space. I don't think I would be doing that. I would be saving money for everything else and then maybe later on getting a physical office space. I would not be paying for a website designer. I think website designers are great. I am not good at website designing, but I think in this initial phase that's not where the money is going to go. I also would not be paying for an expensive coaching program. In this really, really low budget phase, there is no room for that. So I would join some low cost or free membership groups, or like Facebook groups, right? Ask your peers. I would listen to a ton of free podcasts, read a lot of blogs, attend the webinars, all of those things to educate yourself. And then I would not be like making big branding investments. So I would skip the pricey logos, the branding packages, color consultations. You could absolutely do that later, but it can wait. Because starting on $1,000 budget is tough. It is not easy. It's going to take a lot of being very, very careful with your money and a lot of difficult decisions. But guess what? That is preparing you for the life of a business owner. There's a lot of difficult decisions that need to make. So starting on $1,000 budget is doable, but it takes a lot of time, persistence, and creativity. You are going to put in a lot of effort. Your time is your biggest investment in this case. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode, how to start a practice on $1,000. Stay tuned next week and the following week. This is a 3-part series. Next week, I'll talk about starting on a $3,000 budget and then a $5,000 budget. More options, more tools, faster launches. I hope that you will check out the show notes for this episode. I'm going to put links to a lot of the different resources that I talked about so that you can go check them out. So go to therapyforyourmoney.com. You can get the show notes there. See you next week. Take care. That's it for today's episode of Therapy for Your Money. Catch us on Instagram and Facebook at Therapy for Your Money Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to Green Oak Accounting on YouTube. Until next time.
The information contained in this podcast represents the host and guest's general opinions and should not be construed as personalized accounting and tax advice. Listeners should consider all facts and circumstances before applying this information and seek appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. Any info provided does not constitute accounting, tax, or legal advice.